to our June Lunch and Learn. I am Amanda Lakin, Director of Communications and Marketing for the Coalition, and I just have a couple quick announcements for all of you today, letting you know what we've been doing behind the scenes right now. So if you are a coalition member, first of all, thank you for being a member and supporting our work. And very excited to announce that within the coming days, we are going to be launching a new CRM system. This is where I'll be managing all of your memberships, our events, communications, all of that fun stuff. And you will be receiving an email to log into this new system. And I have a little screenshot here of what that's going to look like for all of you. And as a member, you are going to be able to update your contact information from this page. You'll be able to register for events. You'll see up in the top right-hand corner, there's a little button to register for an upcoming event. You'll be able to pay invoices online, renew your membership, pay event registration. You'll also be able to keep a credit card on file for auto renewal. And this is also just going to be a space where we'll be sharing with our members resources and, member only information. So again, we're very excited. This is going to be a very awesome step up from our current system. I'll be giving a lot of emails, a lot of email blasts letting you know, hey, register, or this email is coming out so you can sign up. So please keep an eye out. If you have questions or trouble, reach out to me. And with that new launch of this new system, we will soon be launching registration for our upcoming events. So first we have our member-only events, our July policy forums in Northern and Southern Nevada. These are going to be at the Nugget in Sparks and the Culinary Academy of Las Vegas. It's going to be $35 for members. There will be lunch, coffee, water, all that good stuff provided. And if you attended in 2022, you know this is just a space where we bring our members together to talk about housing policy and priorities for the 2025 legislative session. And of course, our biggest event of the year is our Nevada Housing Conference. This year, it's going to be on October 16th and 17th at the Nugget in Sparks, Nevada. I have some early bird registration pricing here for you and wanted to let you know that we did send out a call for proposals. The deadline is approaching this Sunday. So if you have an idea for a breakout topic, a panel, a workshop, a training, anything that you would like to share with us, we'd love to hear your ideas. But again, deadline is this Sunday. We will share in the chat a link where you can submit your proposal. And lastly, sponsorships. We have sponsorships available. As of today, I think we have 23 sponsors who have already signed on. So if you are an early sponsor, we sincerely appreciate you. Our sponsors are the main reason that we're able to put on this event, this fun event every year. So if you'd like to be a sponsor this year, please reach out. We have a variety of levels available and different perks and things like that. And just a little heads up, if you're a member and you are attending our conference and want to come in a day early, we are going to have a member mixer on Tuesday the 15th from about 6 to 8 p.m. and would love to have you join us for that. So again, please just keep an eye out on your emails and our social channels. We will be communicating a lot with you in the coming days and weeks as we get this new system launched. So now I'm going to turn it over to our Director of Education Outreach, Joanna Grant, who will kick off our session.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It's so great to see everybody on this call. We have some really amazing speakers today. So thank you. Thank you so much for showing up. If it's your first time joining us, I am Joanna, Director of Education and Outreach for the Coalition. And I'm just going to go ahead and get into it and hand it over. We have Kirsten Stasio or the CEO for Nevada Clean Energy Fund today. We have Esther Toperovsky from the Director of Community Sustainability Partners. And then we'll also see a presentation of some of these resources that those two are going to talk about in action with Frank DeCarlo, the Director of Project Development for Northern Nevada's Empowerment Center. And one of our great partners and members here at the Coalition. So I'll go ahead and hand it over to you, Kirsten, to kick us off.
Thank you so much, Joanna and Amanda. Really great to be back. As Joanna mentioned, my name is Kirsten Stasio. I lead the Nevada Clean Energy Fund. We're a nonprofit organization that provides financing and technical assistance for clean energy projects in Nevada. Most of you have probably seen me before, or my colleague Greg Zegas, our Director of Investments. I was looking back at my notes and presentations. And I think I first presented at the Nevada Housing Coalition Lunch and Learn back in June 2022, which was our first year of operation. So I'm really excited to be back to talk about a lot of developments that have happened since then. I've been talking a lot to stakeholders in this forum about the significant federal clean energy funds that are becoming available that can benefit affordable housing and help accelerate affordable housing and goals in Nevada and for Nevada's communities. And we're at a point now where a big chunk of that federal clean energy funding has now arrived. So the moment is here. For example, in April, the Nevada Clean Energy Fund was selected for a $156 million Solar for All award that's going to support solar for low-income households, including in affordable housing. And there are several other significant federal clean energy funding awards that have been announced. So I'm excited today to be here alongside Esther Toperovsky from Community Sustainability Partners, and also Frank from the Empowerment Center, to talk about how affordable housing stakeholders in Nevada can access these financing opportunities and also technical assistance to take advantage of these funds in this moment. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Esther to really kick us off.
Great, thanks so much, Kirsten. Let me see if I can get to my shared screen here. Can you guys see that? Yep. Okay, great. So thank you to both Amanda and Joanna and also Kirsten and Frank just for letting me join this conversation with you all. And so I'm Esther Toperovsky. I'm the executive director at Community Sustainability Partners. And to give you guys just a little background about who we are, I would say, probably housers first and community development finance kind of experts first and foremost. And we have expertise bringing in almost 30 years of experience on our team, bringing in green financing into community development and affordable housing. I was previously at Enterprise Community Partners, have worked with a lot of affordable housing developers, both nonprofit and for-profit across the country. I sit in New York City, but we're a national firm, and we work on advisory and strategy and really direct implementation to help a lot of folks bring these sort of green resources into kind of designing programs for public agencies, energy agencies, and housing agencies, and also working directly with community lenders on green lending strategies. And we work directly with affordable housing developers on sort of portfolio scale solar and how do you get decarbonization sort of into projects. So we've been rolling our sleeves up quite a bit lately with the sort of infusion of capital and a lot of federal investment tax credits and doing applications for folks on the ground across the country. Let me go to the next slide. Let me see. Okay. So I think, Kirsten's going to talk about this a little bit, and I think a lot of you have probably heard quite a bunch about the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. And I'm just going to talk about resources a little bit just to kind of level set where we are and where things have come, and obviously how this directly relates. Kirsten's going to talk a little bit about the Solar for All and how you guys have gotten obviously an allocation there as a state and how these other sort of sources might sort of impact you. So there's $27 billion in greenhouse gas reduction funding in the sort of three competitions that have gone out. So the $14 billion with the National Clean Investment Fund has been allocated to 3 entities. The Clean Communities Investment Accelerator has been allocated to a few entities, and the Solar for All is $7 billion in funding that has gone to public agencies. So the first bucket, the $14 billion, the National Clean Investment Fund, that is, I think about that bucket as sort of lending capital, and that's gone to 3 different groups. So Climate United is a group that's led by a very strong CDFI, and Calvert Impact Capital and Self-Help that does sort of single family. So Community Preservation Corporation, or CPC, is really, if you're multifamily, if you're in the multifamily space, they're going to have quite a bit of lending capital. I know they did a webinar today and yesterday, if you weren't able to see that. And I think Kirsten has some slides on what they're offering, but they're going to be providing sort of mortgage-like or green mortgage-like capital to multifamily. Power Forward Communities is led by Rewiring, Enterprise Community Partners, and Habitat. they got an award, and they're still sort of formulating what that's going to be. But they have a very strong focus, obviously, on multifamily and single family affordable housing. The Coalition for Green Capital, they have a very strong focus working with green banks across the country and are providing some sort of flexible capital there. So this is all sort of concessionary or low cost capital that these three groups are going to be implementing nationally. And those programs, timeline wise, are basically still being negotiated with the EPA, and more or less, I think timeline, people are thinking about the funding hitting the streets earliest end of August and maybe early fall. The Clean Communities Investment Accelerator, that's a different pot of funding. I put that pot of funding in the sort of grants category. So this is a pot of funding that a few organizations got, and they are going to implement that to sub-grantees, and that's going to be funding to capitalize your balance sheet, $5 to $10 million, if you're learning how to do sort of green lending, and some money for technical assistance. So this will be direct sort of grant money that's going to be going to folks like community lenders to be able to provide grants to do a lot of decarbonization work. And then the Solar for All money is solar specific, and that is going specifically to public agencies. So the IRA and the bill incentives for affordable housing that are coming out, there are some that exist today, and there's some that are going to hit the street. So because of this legislation that happened, there are rebates and incentives, not just sort of lending capital that are in the market. So Treasury at the federal level, we're going to talk about that a little bit, has sort of extended their investment tax credit or tax credits for solar. There's a bonus for multifamily affordable that I'm going to get into a little bit. There's also a tax credit for energy 45L. HUD got about a $900,000, almost $1 billion award to do their green resilient retrofit program. That program has been on the street, has been very almost fully subscribed. I'm going to get into that a little bit later as well. A very good program for affordable housing. The Department of Energy has very specific rebate programs that are hitting the street that are coming through state energy offices, but have not been rolled out quite yet, and people are still sort of implementing and creating those programs. So earliest you'll probably see that as 2025. And then we just talked about the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. So I think with all of that in mind, that there's now, I would say, the language around kind of going green, so to say, has just changed, right? It used to be sort of energy efficiency, LED lighting, getting energy sort of down and energy use in your building, right? And that's now changed. So I like to talk about sort of, so what does this mean? And what are all the requirements for this funding, right? So you're doing a retrofit. You are building a building and it needs to be energy efficient, but what does it mean to get to net zero? What does it mean to do decarbonization? What does it mean to get greenhouse gas emission reductions out of your building? And what are those actual scopes of work, right? So if you look at this timeline on the efficiency side, this is sort of where pre-greenhouse gas reduction fund energy efficiency, utility incentives and things sort of landed, right? So it's kind of installation of building features, right, that use less energy. It doesn't involve sort of switching fuel sources at all. And if you look at the second bucket, the zero over time, that's sort of the minimum greenhouse gas reduction fund retrofit threshold. So if you're using funding that's coming from these sort of sources that we're talking about, the minimum threshold sort of falls within this zero over time bucket, right? So it's kind of coming up with a plan to move from the current state to a future state of being a net zero emissions building. So what does that mean? That means kind of partial electrification, or potentially looking at things like solar PV on your property, starting to use renewable sources if you hadn't before. Getting to near net zero, what does that sort of mean over time, right? That's a building that has very high energy performance. The amount of energy required should be significantly covered by energy from renewable sources produced on site or nearby. So you're using most of your sources with renewable on site, and you're meeting something potentially like a passive house or a LEED Platinum certification to meet the definition of kind of near to net zero. If you're a net zero building, which is, I think, the hardest to achieve, that's sort of a minimum requirement for greenhouse gas reduction fund new construction buildings. That's a threshold. So a lot of the sources that we talk about from places like the NCEF, or where that lending capital is coming from, a lot of projects have to meet, if they're new construction, the sort of net zero. And what that means is highly energy efficient, sort of free of on-site emissions from energy use and powered solely from a renewable energy source. That doesn't have to be on-site, that can be off-site or on-site. So just to kind of give a little lay of the land of what we're talking about here, I always like to give some sort of definitions and a bit of an idea of scope of work. So again, scoping decarbonization retrofit projects, I try to put it in these sort of 4 buckets. So the energy management and solar, just kind of thinking about solar PV and rooftop or ground mounted or carport. There's a lot of different ways to do solar. And you can use this sort of funding for things like battery storage, full building electrification, and water efficiency. Thinking about the mechanical system when we're talking about decarbonization, a lot of folks are kind of throwing out language around heat pumps for heating and cooling. And what does that sort of mean? And what is the right equipment for your property? And heat pump for water heaters as well. And then looking at things like all electric appliances, cooking and laundry, and energy sort of recovery ventilation. So looking at strong ERV systems in the sort of mechanical bucket. And then when we start to look at decarbonization, you start to look at envelope, which is insulation, so highly insulated, and air sealing, and looking at windows. And I think another category that's very important when you're thinking about affordable housing and you're thinking about residents and you're thinking about benefits is this sort of make ready health and safety. So there's a sort of make ready bucket when you're on the path to net zero, where you can start updating your electrical panels and your wiring upgrades to be able to take advantage of things like electric appliances, roof coating, or just roof repair. You're going to have to think about if potentially doing things like solar on site, addressing electrical or gas safety hazards, because if you are sealing up a building, you have to make sure that the air that you're breathing internally is optimal for residents. Moisture damage, asbestos abatement, because you might have to open up, walls to update electrical and do some other sort of substantial rehab. So I like to sort of talk about the whole entire holistic package of what it actually takes when we're thinking about decarbonization. It's not just sort of solar, but it's sort of a package of systems to be able to get to a path to net zero, to reach truly deeply energy efficient and using other sort of fuel sources. So if we want to look at this at a very rudimentary level, with comparing kind of like typical energy versus decarb scope. So historically, a lot of folks would come in and get an energy audit. You get money from your utility incentives and some rebates. And a typical energy scope that we've seen is thermostats, kind of updating your boiler furnace controls. On the mechanical side, you're going from a traditional furnace to a more efficient ventilation. Not necessarily changing out the whole HVAC sort of system or distribution. You're doing some insulation, and the cost range sometimes is between $3,000 to $5,000 a unit. The sources can come from things like utility incentives that exist in the market, maybe some grant programs, maybe some owner equity or some reserves. Zero over time scope of work. And I think what's happening in the market is, I think the reason I'm showing this is because we're starting to get data. This is all new. There's gobs of money coming into the market. A lot of folks don't necessarily know how to do these upgrades. And there's not a lot of clear data on the cost per unit or the cost to do these types of things. So this is why we're sort of talking about the sources and cobbling the sources together to make sure that we really understand how we can actually make this work for our project. So getting to zero over time scope could look like solar or solar ready. Or electric upgrades. It could look like electric heat pumps, fresh air ventilation systems, some more roof or wall insulation like I talked about before. And you could see the cost range it's exponentially higher, 30 to 70,000 a unit. In some cases, we've seen higher than 70,000 a unit. So when we start to think about sources, I think Kirsten's going to show us kind of a capital stack, and I think Frank's going to talk about some of your projects too, but this is why we're talking about the tax credits. We're talking about the solar tax credits. We're talking about 45L energy tax credits, not as easy to use. We're talking about this sort of DOE homes and hair rebates, which are not on the street yet, utility incentives, and then debt that is potentially available to cover some of the cost of these through the greenhouse gas reduction fund that's going to be hitting the street. And we're just learning the terms for some of that funding right now. So I don't want to get into too many details, but and I could share these slides as well, but what's happened with the federal investment tax credit. So I think a lot of folks probably know what this is, but it's a tax credit that reduces the federal income tax liability for a percentage of the cost of a solar system that's installed during the tax year. That's what sort of when we talk about the investment tax credit, it's for renewables. The difference with the IRA bill that happened is, this tax credit was going to sunset. It went down to 26%. It's usually 30%, and it got extended for about 10 more years. And in addition, there are 3 different categories of benefits that make it vastly different than the way it was structured before. So Treasury came out with, you get the base credit for 30% that can be paid in various ways. As a tax credit, now you can look at it from a direct pay perspective. So a payment from the IRS in lieu of tax, in lieu of a tax credit. Eligibility for direct pay, nonprofit, state, tribal governments, and rural cooperatives. So they've expanded sort of eligibility. And now the tax credit has a transferability. Since January 2023, they can be sold on an open market. And this kind of opens the door for a lot more investors to utilize the tax credits and get the benefits of the tax credits. And so there's a competitive bonus also for affordable housing. So you can get a boost. You can see the chart over here. There's a lot of ways where you can go above the 30%. So category 1, you get a 10% bonus for projects that are designated in LMI communities. Category 3 with the application, a 20% bonus for federally regulated affordable housing. So if you're a LIHTC project, low income housing tax credit. Category 4, 20% for community solar with LMI benefit. So they've kind of broken it down. And when you're going into your application, you sort of put your project into one of these categories to potentially get a 10% or up to a 20% boost. There's other areas that you can stack on that are maybe sometimes a little harder to meet. If you look over here, you get a base credit, 30%. You can be in an energy community, domestic content, if you can show that the solar panels were made domestically. And there's, if you're on tribal land, low-income resident project or economic benefit project, and those things are all sort of categorized on the website, which I think I also have on this presentation somewhere. The next tax credit that was revamped was a 45L. That's additional funding. If you're, if you're already kind of meeting some level of energy efficiency requirements at your state, at your code, if you are already meeting through your housing agency, enterprise green communities, you can potentially look at these as an opportunity to stack in. They're stackable with low-income housing tax credits. These also, again, you get more per dwelling unit, the more aggressive you go. So if you meet DOE Zero Energy Ready, you can get 1,000 a dwelling unit. If you also meet prevailing wage, you get benefits per dwelling unit if you can kind of prove that you meet these sort of energy standards plus prevailing wage. And I know there's been some sort of issues and it's been a little bit harder. This tax credit hasn't been quite as seamless. My team, what we do is we kind of roll our sleeves up and we help folks directly with some of these applications. And to be totally honest, these have not been as easy to sort of acquire and meet. The Department of Energy, so again, with the caveat that state energy offices are getting money from the Department of Energy. They got a very large allocation of money, just federally, the DOE, for a lot of these programs. The state energy offices are still sort of setting up the rollout. And again, they may not come out till about 2025. But, the difference here is that the HARE program, the home energy rebate, that is specifically eligible beneficiaries are LMI households, and you can get upfront discount of about $8,000. And the activities are, energy upgrades and high efficiency appliances. So again, this is sort of measured on potential energy savings for multifamily buildings. The amount you can get varies. The more aggressive you are with modeled savings, the more you get per unit. So low income homes or dwelling units get sort of a different amount. And you kind of have to sort of prove out and showcase the energy savings that you can get for these rebates. That's how the home energy rebate program was structured. And again, this is for upgrades for highly efficient appliances and energy efficiency. Another rebate's coming out, the HERE program, is the home electrification appliance rebate. That one, you can get a pretty significant amount per unit. Again, this hasn't hit the street, but you can get almost $14,000 per household if you meet a lot of this stuff over to the right. Again, for-profits, nonprofits, state and tribal governments, rural cooperatives are eligible. You must serve LMI households, single family and multifamily are eligible. You can provide LMI households with discounts for energy upgrades and highly efficient appliances as well. The website here is under the US DOE administering through the state energy offices. And as you can see over to the right, if you are, less than 80% more aggressive, you get 100%. Moderate income, you get about 50% of the rebate. And they list out really clearly. It's pretty easy to follow. If you're doing a heat pump upgrade, you can get about 8,000 a unit. Heat pump, water heater, electric stove, cooktop. So these things are going to be, sort of when they come out, if they're structured sort of the right way through state energy offices, really significant in buying down the cost. So I just wanted to go over a little bit the HUD, also just not to leave it off, the Green and Resilient Retrofit Program, because it's been pretty significant. The reason I grade out leading edge and comprehensive, those program due dates for those applications have passed. And those where you can get almost 60,000, pretty significant amounts per dwelling unit, or 80,000 if you can meet some of these program requirements. The Elements program, the deadline is July 31st, which is very soon, but it's about 40,000 a dwelling unit or 750,000 per property. So it's not small amounts of money per property, but this is sort of in progress. And the funds are for efficiency, resilience, heat pumps, and Energy Star windows. And I know a lot of affordable housing developers have really taken advantage, because you can get this funding in the form of a grant or a loan, depending on how you need it. And the way HUD structured it is really applicable to how sort of housing works. So this is my contact information, and I know I blew through that really quickly, and there is a lot of information, but I want to make sure I leave a little room for Kirsten and Frank to go over their programs.
Great. Thank you so much, Esther. All right, let me share my screen here. Okay, and let me just start by saying, I think Esther went over a lot of content, because there is such a huge opportunity right now with all of these different federal funding opportunities. As was mentioned in the chat, we're going to be sharing our slides, and also planning to submit to the Nevada Housing Coalition for opportunities to dive more into this with you all at the Nevada Housing Coalition annual conference later in the fall. All right, so just a reminder about the Nevada Clean Energy Fund. We're a 501c3 nonprofit organization that was established by state legislation to support a thriving, affordable, and accessible clean energy economy in Nevada. And we were created out of the recognition that many Nevadans lack access to the financial and technical resources necessary to invest in clean energy opportunities and reap the benefits involved. So what we do is we provide financing and technical assistance to a variety of different stakeholders in Nevada, including in the housing sector, single family homes, and affordable multifamily housing, to access clean energy opportunities, and as a result, reduce their energy costs and live in a healthier environment and climate. As Esther was highlighting, we have a really significant opportunity before us right now with the unprecedented amount of federal clean energy funding from the Inflation Reduction Act and the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, as well as the CHIPS and Science Act. And it's not just an opportunity for clean energy in our climate, but also for our communities, because a lot of these funds are being specifically prioritized for low income and historically underserved communities. So the reason why we're all here today is to talk about how the affordable housing sector in Nevada can benefit from these funds specifically. So I want to dive into the Solar for All program, because as I mentioned, Esther called it out. It's part of the Environmental Protection Agency's big $27 billion greenhouse gas reduction fund. And the Nevada Clean Energy Fund on Earth Day of this year in April was awarded a $156 million award for Nevada. And EPA made one award or attempted to make one award per state. I just want to highlight this because I want to say thank you to everyone here. Nevada actually received the biggest award on a per capita basis in terms of low income and underserved communities. So in terms of eligible households, we had the biggest award. And you know, we worked really hard on our application. We talked to a lot of you and received a lot of letters of support. We received letters of support from over 70 entities, including folks on this call. So huge thank you for making Nevada have a very competitive application here. So these funds are meant to provide to support solar projects that provide benefits to low income and disadvantaged households. That's households under 80% area median income or located in a designated disadvantaged census tract by the federal government. So with these funds, we're going to be launching, there's a 5-year period of performance, and we're going to be launching financing programs, a combination of rebates and loans for solar for single family homes, for multifamily affordable housing, and for community solar projects. One component of this funding and the federal funding requirements is that we have to ensure that households benefiting from these projects receive at least a 20% savings on their utility bills. And this is really important because we've seen, you know, instances, also predatory practices in the solar industry where solar gets on a rooftop, whether you're talking about affordable multifamily housing or even single family housing, and those savings don't actually materialize. So a lot of what we're doing with our program design is making sure that that doesn't happen and baking in consumer protections and developing vetted contractor networks who are going to be working with us and all of you to implement this funding. But it also means in the context of affordable multifamily housing developers that we have to look at how households within the building are going to benefit, right? Through like benefits sharing agreements or some other mechanism. Right. Another component of our funding, and part of the reason why we're having a loan product paired with a rebate, is that we really want to optimize and stack these funds with the federal tax credits that Esther was talking about. Primarily the Section 48 tax credit that's available for commercial projects that provides the base investment tax credit covering 30% of the cost of a project, with those bonuses for domestic content minimums and siting in an energy community, and those allocated low income bonuses that have to be applied for. And I wanted to show actually where our energy communities and low income communities are in Nevada. So almost all of Nevada, except for unfortunately Washoe County, is actually an energy community. So that means that automatically projects located in the green and pink areas here are going to get a 10% bonus on top of the 30% base tax credit. So that means that 40% of your solar project costs can be covered by this federal tax credit. And nonprofit and non-taxable entities like local governments and whatnot can access via direct pay a cash reimbursement from the IRS, as Esther mentioned. Let's see. So in terms of low income communities, the map here shows you which communities are considered low income and therefore eligible to apply for that 10% bonus. But in addition to that, affordable housing properties, qualifying affordable housing properties can also apply for a 20% bonus. That actually aligns really well with the requirements of our Solar for All funds. So that's something that we would highly recommend developers we're working with apply for. And Frank's going to talk about how Marva and the Empowerment Center actually successfully applied for the 10% bonus in collaboration with the Nevada Clean Energy Fund. So just to give an illustrative capital stack for a solar project on an affordable multifamily housing development here, let's say you've got a $500,000 rooftop solar project on your multifamily property. The Section 48 base tax credit, the 30% tax credit, can cover $150,000. That's not including any bonuses, but you could get another $100,000 bonus from the low income credit, and another 10% honestly on top of that from the energy community adder, which is huge. And then we're going to be coming in with our Solar for All rebate and Solar for All loan to stack on top of that to really make this an attractive opportunity for and help augment the capital stack for affordable housing developers. I do want to call out in Nevada, net metering isn't accessible to tenants of individually metered multifamily buildings. So we are actively working right now to build momentum for our next legislative session next year to introduce legislation that addresses this inequity. We're working with affordable housing stakeholders, environmental and social justice nonprofits, and clean energy developers on this, and look forward to working with all the folks here. I also want to call out the fact that we are going to be launching education and technical assistance programs associated with Solar for All, including continuing to provide technical assistance directly as we have for the past several years, but also working with partners like the Nevada Housing Coalition, Nevada Rural Housing, tribal employment rights offices, and others to provide training and filling workforce gaps that we're hearing from all of you exist in terms of not just developing solar projects, but also operating, maintaining them over the long term. We'll also be launching a voucher program with Solar for All funds that affordable housing stakeholders can take advantage of to participate in clean energy trainings to help them design and manage and operate solar projects. And then, as mentioned, we're also developing vetted contractor networks, and we will be doing capacity building around Davis-Bacon because that is a requirement of our federal funding, as I know many here are familiar with. To give Frank some time, I'm going to stop there.
Are you ready?
It looks like Kirsten froze. I was trying to decide if it was me or if it was someone else.
I think we lost Kirsten.
Okay. Frank, why don't you go ahead? Is it possible, Amanda, for you to have the stop sharing on your end?
Yeah, I'm trying that right now. There we go.
Okay, perfect. All right, Frank, go ahead and start your piece.
Yeah, so I'll announce myself. My name is Frank DeCarlo. I'm the Director of Project Development. We originally started with the Empowerment Center. We provide transitional living for women that have alcohol and drug problems. It evolved into a situation where women are graduating and have nowhere to live here in Northern Nevada. Rents are too high. So we developed the Marble Way apartment complex. We're building our second one now of 3. The first one was solar on the roof. We were projected to get about 41% of our energy costs. And Kirsten talked about this a little bit. Often you get sold proposals or estimates that are higher than what you end up with. We ended up with 28% on a 41% estimate. So that kind of drove me towards thinking about how do I improve my solar? When we were at the Nevada Housing Coalition meeting in Vegas, Kirsten had a breakout meeting, and I got a chance to meet with Sean Armstrong, and he runs Redwood Energy. And part of his conversation was that there was a lot of rebates that came off of a full solar project. And when Kirsten, I think it was Kirsten was presenting it, the net zero, it had all those categories, nearly zero. We've gone fully net zero on our second project. As I said, the first project, we ended up with 28%, which because we're a affordable housing, our operating income is very, very limited. So we have to keep our operating expenses in line really to remain solvent. And when the electric energy costs went up, as well as our projected production went down, we suffered a lot as far as operating expenses versus our income. So when I ran into Redwood Energy, the rebates really attracted me. There was government rebates. There was high energy rebates that had nothing to do with the 30% base or the 10% extra that we qualified for affordable living. We were trying to get rebates based on electrical appliances, heat pump usage, mini splits, all those things will eventually, I believe, according to Kirsten, probably next year be eligible for probably people on this phone call. Going back to Marble Way 2, again, we did that because there was no place for these folks to go. We take people that are low income, we'll say affordable living. Our average income is 40% of area median income. So we go from 30 to 50% to get in. Our average rent is probably around $720 for a 1-bedroom apartment, $825 for a 2-bedroom. Going back to one of the challenges, I think first of all, aside from us not getting those rebates that have to do with the various electrical components that I talked about, we are projecting to see a significant increase in our electrical bill. So currently at the Marble Way 1, the first project that I had talked about, our average bill there is $950 a month. And so if anybody's calculating, there's also these other numbers that are fees, and they represent, I don't know, 2-3% of your electrical bill. So getting to a point where you won't have any bill can be challenging. The other thing I want to talk about, because it was brought up, is the net zero. If you live in Nevada, I assume a lot of folks on this call are from Nevada, or most of them are. Net zero becomes challenging because Nevada Energy prefers not to allow you to build a system that produces more power than your projected consumption. They don't want you they're trying not to have you be net zero, and they won't approve it if your information that says what your production is higher than your consumption. You need a justification letter from electrical engineer to do that. I know some of this is technical, but if you're considering what we're doing, you may need to know that there's some challenges in what we're trying to do. Not only are we going to see significant savings around $22,000 a year, those challenges pop up when you're trying to hit that net zero number. And Nevada Energy doing that to us, if they can keep us even, our consumption equals our production, it looks like it could be net zero. But the truth is, in the winter months, when you're using more energy, they credit it back to at 75%. So in the summer months, you're overproducing, you're pushing the energy back to the grid. At that point, they take a dollar for dollar. But when you need it in the winter and they give it back to you, they give it to you at 75%. So it's very difficult to hit the net zero. And it would be great if they'd let us go a little bit above, but they won't. So our hope is that our estimates as far as production are low and consumption are low, and then we can hit the net zero. But it is difficult to hit. I don't mean to rain on the parade or anything, but other people I'm sure are doing the same thing. One of the other challenges we have is, and somebody touched on it, I wasn't sure who it was. We have a flat roof development. Marble Way 1 and Marble Way 2 are flat roofs. And I believe a lot of us in the affordable living apartment areas have flat roofs. We found it impossible to come to a net zero, to come to where our production would exceed our consumption. We hired a third-party engineer to come up with our consumption numbers. And when I ran the numbers that were going to come up of our roof, of the 230 we need in kilowatt hours, we're talking about what happens at any given time, not a cumulative of a year, what you need at any given time. And we came up with our need of 230 kilowatts. The roof alone only gave us 66 kilowatts. And that became a huge challenge because when we started this project, we started with net zero in mind, with rebates in mind, not including the 30 and the 10. And what happened was we realized our roof wasn't going to do it. So we had to build carports. And if I can share this with you, I don't have a lot of pictures, but I'm going to show this one to you if I can. Just click right there. Okay. No? Are you up there? Can you see it?
We can see it.
Okay, so if you look on the left, you'll see the roof. And so we maximized that roof. Again, it only gave us 66 kilowatts of the 230 we needed. So we had to start covering our carports, and we actually added carports. We added structures to make sure we got to that number. And that number was 163 kilowatts, which we have since got to. The cost of those carports is $269,000. That when you add that into the cost of the solar itself, which is 470,000, that cost is $740,000. So when you look at it, and if we were to get a 40% rebate, which we've already qualified for the extra 10, and then everybody gets the 30% base, we will get 295,000 back against our $740,000, which is significant, and we're super happy to get that. Those of you that are doing this might very well get those rebates, the other government rebates that we found out from Redwood Energy for having electric heat pumps and things like that. The other challenge that you want to consider as you move forward with net zero is it requires electric heat pumps. And electric heat pumps, an electric heat pump costs on average about $8,200. A gas heat pump is about $6,200. The other thing that happens is your electrical panels in your building, they call it switchgear, goes from about $30,000 to about $50,000 because you have to increase the amperage to accept the solar at a larger level. So it can be challenging. I think we're going to be able to do it. I'm really excited about it. We have our third project is another empowerment center that we're building. Because HMI funds were a little bit less there, I have to use some gas. But the goal is to make it as electrical, as solar friendly as we possibly can. So with that said, I've kind of laid out a bunch of information. If at some point there are questions, I'll be happy to take them. But everyone, the main thing is I wouldn't trust your solar estimator, solar salesperson to give you a really strong number. And then be ready. If you're trying to do a roof, unless you have a lot of square feet, our building's 35,000 square feet, you most likely will not be able to go to zero energy on your roof, at which point you better include the costs of the structures, the carports. And the good news is that 40% that we qualify will cover those structures. You can't put a roof on the structure. You have to use the solar panels as the roof, which then makes that structure part of the solar array, which now it entitles you to the 40%. So a lot of information. I don't have any slides. I wish I was as competent as you folks, but that's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Frank. That was a lot of good information to consider. We definitely have some time for questions. If folks want to put their questions in the chat or in the Q&A box using those features. But in the meantime, I wonder if Kirsten or Esther could maybe address some of the challenges and talk about maybe what are some of potential solutions in other communities that you've seen. And maybe just kind of talk through some of the stuff that Frank mentioned, and maybe we could find ways to work through some of that stuff, since it sounds like folks are just we're learning as we go here.
I mean, I'd say, Frank, I concur. You can't necessarily completely always trust some of the solar folks that come on the street and kind of give you estimates. You have to make sure that you're working with sort of an owner's rep or someone that really truly understands I would say, housing and affordable housing, and understands the buildings and is kind of really coming to the site and walking through and giving you the proper estimates. I think that's one of the biggest things that we've come across is really making sure that you're sizing things kind of properly and working with an owner's rep that can actually sort of represent you and your sort of best interests. And it is hard because if you think about it in many locations, obviously where you all are, in most places, a lot of roofs don't have a ton of space, or there's a lot of things happening on top of roofs already, or in some locations, if you are in an urban center, there's shading. So it's hard to sometimes get the exact load amount that you sort of require. So we've had to come up with some, it sounds to me, Frank, like you guys are quite smart and you have the space to come up with a carport solution, and it's not a cheap solution, and so I think there's that, not everybody has that sort of opportunity or has that sort of space. So sometimes we've had to come up with sort of creative models where some folks have looked at community solar, or they've looked at working with a third party and some level of, ownership, where the direct net benefits go to their sort of residents as subscribers to a system if you need sort of a certain size. So there's various different ways of kind of going about that, or looking at different types of solar arrays. There's carport and there's ballasted, and there's very many different types of sort of solar arrays to sometimes sort of maximize the amount that you're getting. So, I mean, this is all just to say, some of the challenges are that it's not a modular one size fits all solution, but I would say to overcome that challenge is to make sure that you're working with trusted folks like, that have done this before, whether it's a group like Frank's, where you kind of give them a phone call and say, how'd you guys do this? A, or B, if there are owners reps or people in your area that sort of understand this world, making sure that you're kind of handholding. Our team, we are sort of affordable housers first. That's what we do. So we always sort of have a vested and best interest in understanding that the number one goal is preservation. It's development of more affordable housing. It's tenant sort of comfort and benefits. It's making sure that affordability kind of remains. And how do you sort of augment and make sure that you're fulfilling your mission in terms of what affordable housing is supposed to meet and do from an owner's rep perspective, and how can this be sort of additive to your tenants or additive to another source of revenue coming to your balance sheet. A lot of the structures that we worked on kind of look like LIHTC structures, where you can kind of create a solar renewable LLC as part of your housing organization and take on all sort of at a corporate level, all the debt and equity, then all the revenue kind of comes back to your balance sheet. So you almost become your own PPA provider. And that's, again, like you were saying, Frank, getting into the weeds, but there are sort of models and structures where you can kind of set it up in a way like you do as a developer, as a traditional development deal, where you're kind of getting a co-development fee, you're getting the revenue, the net benefits, and the savings. And there's certain ways to kind of structure things, and that doesn't work for everybody. Some folks want a third party PPA provider. Some folks want direct ownership. So there's not necessarily a one size fits all, but there are different buckets and categories for what may or may not work for you, depending on size and load requirements, like Frank was talking about, or depending on, just the kind of net benefits that you want to put back on your sort of balance sheet as a developer. Kirsten, I don't know if you want to add to anything there, the challenges.
Yeah, maybe just a very specific one in the context of community of solar for all that you kind of alluded to. We have heard from some affordable housing developers, similar to Frank's comment about limited roof space on multifamily buildings, that it might be challenging in some instances to build enough solar to deliver those 20% savings to all the tenants within the building. And so we're also going to have a community solar option where we use the financing to transfer the benefits directly to low-income households, so that in instances where there isn't enough roof space. So that's going to be another option there. The other thing that I just wanted to call out, I did put a link to our Solar for All interest form in the chat, where folks can sign up to get updates and indicate their interest if they want to be a project host, or if they're, even single family households can participate, or if they want to be a technical partner. But in terms of timing, we're in the process of finalizing our award with EPA right now. We'll be working on program design this summer and plan to reach out to have listening sessions to get input on our program design and draft program design as well. So definitely including with affordable housing stakeholders. So be on the lookout for that. We are hoping to launch our application portal for affordable housing developers and community solar project hosts late fall, and then launch our application portals for single family households early next year. So just wanted to give a sense of timing there.
Awesome. Very quickly, there's one more question in the chat around net metering. The question for Frank is the Marvel community net master or master metered, and then for Kirsten, and Nevada Energy's rules allowing for exceptions to net meter for multifamily affordable housing. You guys could answer super quickly because we have 4 minutes.
Are you talking to me?
Yeah.
I got people chatting in the back. They're, oh my God. Well, quickly say that again. I know I got just
Marble
a second.
Manor net metered?
Net meter.
Is it master metered? I believe it is.
Oh yeah,
Frank.
one master meter. Everything is free to our residents, internet included.
And Kirsten, did you get your part of the question?
Yeah, so that it's actually a legislative change that would need to happen in order to unlock net metering for individually metered multifamily buildings, right, and tenants, right? So that's what we'll be working on, is that legislative change, and we are in conversations with NV Energy, you know, the PUCN, and as well as other stakeholders like all of you, to hopefully have that be successful next year.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, everybody. We're 2 minutes ahead of 1 p.m. What a great conversation. As Kirsten mentioned, we're hoping to continue this conversation at the conference this year, October 16th and 17th, at the Nugget and Spark. So keep an eye out for that agenda. We still, as Amanda mentioned, we have sponsorship opportunities available, and then our registration will be launched sometime in the middle of July. So keep an eye out for that. And we'll see you next month. Next month, we're going to be talking about affordable housing policy. And then in August, we'll be talking about middle income or workforce housing. So stay tuned and have an amazing afternoon, all of you. Thank you so much.